Years after a difficult divorce, a billionaire CEO's life changes completely when he receives an anonymous package containing a photo album. The buzz of the intercom broke the steady hum of productivity in Alex Sterling's sleek, glass-walled office. The view of the city skyline stretched endlessly before him, a testament to his success. Yet, as he leaned back in his ergonomic chair, there was no satisfaction in his eyes. The intercom crackled again. "Mr. Sterling, there's a package for you." His assistant's voice came through, crisp and professional. "Leave it on the desk, Rachel," Alex replied absently, his focus returning to the quarterly projections on his screen. Minutes later, the faint sound of the door opening barely registered. When the task at hand no longer held his interest, Alex glanced over at the unassuming brown package now occupying the corner of his desk. He frowned. No branding, no return address. Curious, he grabbed a letter opener and slit the tape. Inside, nestled under a protective layer of tissue paper, was a familiar leather-bound photo album. His breath caught in his throat as his hand instinctively brushed against its worn cover. Lifting it out, a note fluttered free and landed on the desk. "Remember why you started." The handwriting was unmistakable. Alex sank into his chair, the weight of the album suddenly far heavier than its contents. His hands trembled as he opened the first page, revealing a photograph of himself and Lila on their wedding day. Her radiant smile filled the frame, and Alex's younger self looked smitten, almost boyish in his tuxedo. For a moment, the years melted away, and he could feel the warmth of that sunlit day. Each page he turned was a window to a life that felt both close and irretrievably distant. Their honeymoon in Santorini. Sunday mornings spent cooking breakfast together in their tiny first apartment. The birth of their daughter, Amelia, and the blurry photo he had taken moments after she was placed in Lila's arms. But the pages told a story that didn't stay idyllic. The later photos seemed fewer, the moments less spontaneous. Memories of strained dinners, late-night arguments, and long absences began to surface, filling the empty spaces between the snapshots. The last photograph was of the three of them, Alex, Lila, and Amelia on a rare family vacation, smiling for the camera. It had been a facade even then. The intercom buzzed again, startling him. "Mr. Sterling, your 3 p.m. is here," Rachel announced. "Reschedule," Alex replied curtly, his voice rougher than he intended. That evening, as the office emptied and the city below came alive with twinkling lights, Rachel knocked on his door. She rarely intruded after hours. "Sir, about the package earlier," she began hesitantly. Alex looked up, his exhaustion evident. "What about it?" "It was sent by Evelyn Hartman," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "She called the office this morning. Said it was important that you receive it personally." Alex stared at her for a long moment. Evelyn. Lila's mother. Of course, it would be her. She had always been the quiet observer, offering advice in measured doses and keeping a protective watch over her daughter. Evelyn had remained cordial after the divorce, even reaching out occasionally to check on Amelia. But this felt different. Rachel lingered, unsure if he needed anything else. "That'll be all," Alex said, his voice softening. When the door closed behind her, he turned back to the album, the note still sitting beside it. "Remember why you started." Was this Evelyn's way of reminding him of what he'd let slip away? Or was it a call to do something about it? The next day, Alex sat across from Lila in the polished, neutral setting of a cafe. It was their bi-weekly meeting to discuss Amelia, a routine that had become more mechanical than cordial over the years. Lila was as poised as ever, her auburn hair pulled back into a simple bun. She wore a pale blue blouse that made her hazel eyes stand out, though they held none of the warmth they once did. "She's struggling in math again," Lila began, her tone brisk. "I've been helping her with homework, but it's clear she needs more support." "Then hire a tutor," Alex said, his response almost automatic. "I've looked into it," Lila replied, her irritation flickering. "But this isn't just about academics. She's been quiet lately." "Withdrawn." Alex shifted uncomfortably. She seems fine when she's with me. Lila arched an eyebrow, the unspoken truth hanging between them. And how often is that, Alex? When was the last time you asked her how she's really feeling? The question hit harder than Alex expected. He opened his mouth to respond but found no answer. She's 8. Lila continued, her voice softening. She notices everything. She notices when you're distracted. When you're not really present. Alex's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to push back, but the truth of her words was undeniable. Look, she said, leaning forward slightly. I'm not here to blame you. I just want what's best for her. We owe her that much. The conversation ended as it always did, with polite but strained goodbyes. Alex returned to his penthouse, the emptiness of the space more oppressive than ever. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city below but seeing only the echoes of Lila's words. On the coffee table, the photo album waited, a silent reminder of the life he had built and the one he had lost. For the first time in years, Alex felt something stir in him, a faint but persistent pull towards something more than the hollow victories of his professional life. Evelyn's note lingered in his mind, the meaning still elusive yet inescapable. He poured himself a glass of scotch and sat down, flipping through the album again. This time, he didn't stop at the happy moments or dwell on the sad ones. Instead, he tried to remember the man he had been in those photos, the one who had once believed in more than boardrooms and balance sheets. As the city lights blurred into the early hours of the morning, Alex closed the album and set it aside. He didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, he felt the need to find them. And maybe, just maybe, there was still time. Alex woke the next morning with the photo album still on the coffee table and the faint taste of regret lingering in his mouth. The scotch had helped dull the sharp edges of his thoughts the night before, but now everything was back in focus, sharper and more relentless than before. Evelyn's note gnawed at him like a riddle he couldn't solve. Amelia's face from the family portrait stared up at him through the album's open pages. Her smile was wide and carefree, her tiny hands clutching both his and Lila's fingers. It was a moment frozen in time, long before tension crept into every corner of his life. Closing the album with a sigh, Alex promised himself he'd try harder, with Amelia, with everything. Later that day, Alex found himself in the sterile, bright hallway of Amelia's school. He was running late, as usual, for a parent-teacher conference. Lila was already seated in the classroom when he arrived, her face a polite mask of annoyance as he slipped into the chair beside her. She's doing fine academically, the teacher said, glancing between the two of them. But I'm noticing she's become a bit withdrawn in class. She doesn't participate as much as she used to, and her energy seems lower. Alex shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Lila, who said nothing but gave him a pointed look that spoke volumes. Has anything changed at home? The teacher asked gently. Before Alex could respond, Lila cut in. Amelia's been dealing with a lot of transitions. We're working on making things more stable for her. Alex felt the sting of her words but stayed silent, nodding along as if they were a unified front. He promised himself he'd talk to Amelia tonight, maybe take her out for ice cream or a movie. Something to make her feel special. But the chance came sooner than he expected. That evening, when Alex dropped by Lila's house to pick up Amelia for their scheduled weekend together, he was met with tension before he even stepped through the door. I need to talk to you, Lila said quietly, ushering him into the foyer. What is it now? He asked, his tone sharper than he intended. She's upset, Lila replied, folding her arms. She heard us arguing the other day. She's been acting out ever since. Alex winced. She heard that? Of course she did, Lila said. She's 8, Alex. She notices everything. She's been sulking in her room all afternoon, and now she doesn't even want to go with you. Before Alex could respond, Amelia appeared at the top of the stairs, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I don't want to go, she said defiantly, her small voice cracking. Amelia, come on, Alex said, trying to sound warm but firm. We're going to have fun this weekend, just you and me. No, we're not, she shot back. You're just gonna be on your phone or working like always. The accusation hit Alex like a gut punch. He stared up at his daughter, at the hurt on her face, and realized he had no defense. Lila watched him carefully, her expression softening just a little, as if she could see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed facade. Amelia, let's talk about this, Alex said, his voice quieter now. Why? Amelia said, her eyes filling with tears. You don't care. You only care about work. She turned and ran back to her room, leaving Alex standing in the foyer, stunned and helpless. Lila sighed. She needs you, Alex. Really needs you. Not just someone who shows up on a schedule. Her words lingered as he left, the sound of Amelia's door slamming still echoing in his ears. The next evening, Alex attended a gala for Sterling Industries, one of those glittering events filled with champagne, polished speeches, and strategic networking. He hated these events, but they were a necessary part of maintaining his empire. As he mingled with investors and clients, a woman approached him, her sharp green eyes locking onto his with unnerving precision. Mr. Sterling, she said, holding out her hand. Sophia Grant. I'm with the Chronicle. Alex's professional smile faltered slightly as he shook her hand. Ms. Grant. A pleasure. I'd say the pleasure is mine, she replied, her tone dripping with just enough edge to make him wary. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about Sterling Industries, off the record, of course. I'm afraid now's not the best time, Alex said smoothly, already turning to disengage. I figured you might say that, she said, her voice following him like a shadow. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the reports of employee burnout at your company. Long hours, high turnover, an atmosphere of, let's say, relentless pressure. Alex stopped, his jaw tightening. He turned back to face her, his smile now entirely gone. If you have concerns about my company, Ms. Grant, you're welcome to contact our PR department. PR departments tend to give me the corporate version of the truth, she said, not backing down. I'm more interested in yours. He leaned in slightly, his voice low. If you think you're going to intimidate me into giving you a story, you're wasting your time. Sophia smiled, unbothered by his tone. I think there's more to you than the headlines, Mr. Sterling. I'll see myself out. As she walked away, Alex felt a flash of something he couldn't quite name. Anger, certainly, but also something deeper, an unsettling sense that she saw through him in a way few people did. Later that night, back in his penthouse, Alex found himself drawn to the photo album again. He flipped through it with less urgency this time, letting the images wash over him. His fingers lingered on a picture of Lila from their honeymoon, standing barefoot on a rocky beach, her hair wild in the wind. Another photo caught his eye, a candid shot of Amelia as a toddler, sitting on his lap while he worked at his desk. She was reaching for his keyboard, her tiny hands determined to join in whatever important task her father was doing. He closed the album and stared at the city lights through the massive windows. Evelyn's note resurfaced in his mind. Remember why you started. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he wasn't sure why he had started anymore. His drive, his ambition, they had always been for his family, hadn't they? But somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of that. And now, all that was left were echoes of what could have been. Alex took a deep breath and resolved to make things right, though he wasn't sure how yet. All he knew was that the weight of his choices, and their consequences, was no longer something he could ignore. The morning after his encounter with Sophia Grant, Alex sat at his kitchen island with a cold cup of coffee. The silence of the penthouse pressed in around him, amplifying the disquiet in his mind. He couldn't stop replaying Amelia's words or the sharpness in Sophia's tone. Both accusations felt uncomfortably similar, as if the world was finally holding up a mirror he couldn't avoid. Determined to prove otherwise, Alex decided to make an effort. When an email from Amelia's school announced a family arts night, he cleared his calendar and marked the date. Maybe showing up was the first step. On the night of the event, Alex arrived 10 minutes early, his tailored suit feeling out of place among the more casual crowd of parents. The walls were covered in colorful drawings and projects. As he scanned the room, he spotted Amelia near a table, surrounded by her classmates. She didn't notice him at first, too busy explaining her sculpture to a teacher. Her face lit up with enthusiasm, a rare sight that made Alex's chest tighten with pride and guilt. "Hey, Amelia," he said softly as he approached. Her smile faded the moment she saw him. "What are you doing here?" Alex tried to hide his unease. "I came to see your art. It's great, really." Amelia shrugged, looking away. "Mom already saw it yesterday." The casual dismissal stung. "Well, I'd still like to hear about it," Alex said, forcing a smile. "What's it about?" "It's about nature," she said reluctantly, her tone flat. "It's supposed to be a forest, but we didn't have enough green clay." "It's creative," Alex said, trying to sound genuine. "You've got talent." Amelia didn't respond, instead fidgeting with the edge of her shirt. After an awkward pause, she finally looked up at him, her small face serious. "Why are you really here?" "What do you mean?" Alex asked, confused. "You don't usually come to these things," she said bluntly. "Are you just here to make yourself feel better?" The words hit harder than he expected. Before he could think of a response, Amelia turned and walked back to her friends, leaving Alex standing alone in the middle of the bustling room. When he returned home that night, the emptiness of the penthouse felt suffocating. He opened a bottle of wine and sank into the couch, trying to shake the lingering discomfort. He picked up his phone and almost called Lila but stopped himself. Instead, he scrolled through his calendar, looking for another opportunity to connect with Amelia, though the thought of failing again filled him with dread. The next week, Alex's attempt to focus on work was interrupted by a news alert on his phone. It was an article from the Chronicle, written by Sophia Grant. The headline read, "The Cost of Ambition, the Human Toll of Sterling Industries." Alex's jaw tightened as he skimmed the article. It was a blistering critique, detailing employee burnout, high turnover, and the relentless pressure within his company. Several anonymous quotes from former employees painted a stark picture of a toxic work environment. Furious, Alex called his PR team. "Get me everything you can on Sophia Grant," he demanded. "Who she's spoken to, where she's getting her information. I want it all." As the day wore on, his anger simmered into something more complex. The article wasn't entirely wrong. Sterling Industries had grown rapidly, and the demands of that growth had been steep, not just on his employees, but on him, his family, and everyone around him. Still, the public exposure felt like an attack, and Alex wasn't about to let it go unanswered. That evening, while reviewing the article again, Alex received a message from Rachel, his assistant. "Thought you might want to see this," it read, followed by a link. Curious, Alex clicked and found himself on a website for a community center being developed on the city's east side. The architect behind the project was none other than Lila Hartman. He stared at her name on the screen, then at the glossy rendering of the building, a vibrant, open space designed to serve underprivileged families. It was exactly the kind of project Lila had always dreamed of doing, back when she used to talk to him about her aspirations late at night, long after Amelia had gone to bed. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. While he had been building his empire, Lila had been building something meaningful. Something real. Unable to resist, Alex drove to the construction site the next day. He parked across the street and watched from a distance as workers moved about, carrying materials and shouting directions. Among them, wearing a hard hat and clipboard in hand, was Lila. She looked focused and confident, her gestures animated as she spoke to the foreman. Alex felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, jealousy, and regret. He remembered the countless nights she had asked him to slow down, to prioritize their family and her dreams as much as his own. And now, here she was, thriving without him. Later that afternoon, Alex sat at his desk, distracted and restless. His phone buzzed, and he saw a message from Rachel. "Sophia Grant is here to see you. Says it's urgent." He almost declined but decided against it. "Send her in," he replied. Sophia walked in with the same self-assured demeanor she'd had at the gala. She carried a folder, which she set on his desk without preamble. "I assume you've read the article," she said. Alex leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I have. And I'm curious what you think gives you the right to misrepresent my company." "Misrepresent?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Every detail in that article is backed by evidence. You can call it misrepresentation, but I call it accountability. You don't know what it takes to run a company like mine," Alex said sharply. "The pressure, the decisions, none of it's as simple as you make it sound." "Maybe not," Sophia said, her tone softer now. "But I know the impact it has. I've spoken to the people you've left in your wake, Alex. They don't just tell stories about burnout, they tell stories about feeling like cogs in a machine you built." Her words echoed Lila's critique and even Amelia's accusations. Alex's defenses faltered, though he kept his expression neutral. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Sophia smiled faintly. "I'm not here to tear you down, Alex. I'm here to get the truth. And maybe, just maybe, you should be asking yourself what that truth really is." She left before he could respond, leaving the folder on his desk. Alex didn't open it right away. Instead, he stared at it, feeling exposed in a way he hadn't before. The photo album still sat on the coffee table in his penthouse. That night, Alex opened it again, lingering on the same photo of Amelia as a toddler. He could almost hear her laughter from that day, her tiny voice calling him, "Daddy." Somewhere along the way, he had let her slip into the background of his life. And now, the distance between them felt impossibly vast. Sophia's words, Lila's success, Amelia's accusations, they all pointed to the same truth. Alex Sterling was a man at a crossroads, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure which way to go. The folder Sophia left on his desk sat untouched for days. Alex avoided it like it was a trap, a Pandora's box he wasn't ready to open. But her parting words lingered. "Maybe, just maybe, you should be asking yourself what that truth really is." Her accusation, coupled with Amelia's stinging words and Lila's thriving success, was a storm Alex couldn't seem to escape. Everywhere he turned, reminders of his failures loomed. The life he thought he had built so carefully felt like it was slipping through his fingers. One evening, while scrolling through his emails, an invitation to an upcoming philanthropy event at Lila's community center caught his eye. It was a casual announcement, likely sent to a wide mailing list, but it struck Alex as an opportunity. His first instinct was to ignore it, knowing Lila would see through his intentions. But something deeper, a gnawing need to see her work firsthand, made him RSVP. The event was a week away, leaving Alex plenty of time to second-guess his decision. On the day of the event, he arrived at the construction site dressed down in a simple button-up and slacks, his usual suit replaced with an attempt to blend in. The center was a hive of activity. Volunteers carried materials, painted walls, and discussed plans with enthusiasm. The building was taking shape, its open layout and bright design already radiating warmth and hope. Alex stood on the edges of the activity, trying not to draw attention. Then he saw her. Lila was at the heart of it all, clipboard in hand, moving from one group to another with the kind of confidence and purpose he remembered so vividly. Her hair was pulled back, her face glowing, not with makeup, but with the kind of fulfillment Alex hadn't seen in her for years. It was the same expression she used to have when she talked about her dreams of creating spaces that brought people together. For a moment, Alex felt a pang of jealousy, followed swiftly by shame. This was what she had always wanted, and he had dismissed it as idealistic, impractical. Now, seeing her passion in action, he realized how wrong he had been. He watched her from a distance until their eyes met. Lila's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise quickly replaced by guarded suspicion. She walked toward him, her steps deliberate. "Alex," she said, her tone cool. "What are you doing here?" "I saw the invite," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Thought I'd come by, see what you're working on." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Really? Just curiosity? Or are you looking for another tax write-off?" The jab landed harder than he expected. "It's not like that," he said. "I just wanted to." "To what?" she interrupted, folding her arms. "Ease your guilt? Show up for a photo op? I know how this works, Alex." The frustration in her voice cut deep, but it was the hurt underneath that left him reeling. "That's not why I'm here," he said, struggling to keep his composure. "I wanted to see the work you've done. It's incredible, Lila. You've really built something amazing." Her expression softened slightly, but the tension didn't leave her posture. "You don't get to do this," she said quietly. "You don't get to swoop in and act like you care now. You had years, Alex. Years to support this dream, and you couldn't be bothered. You made it clear where your priorities were." "I know," he admitted, his voice low. "And I hate that. I hate how much I let you down, how much I've let Amelia down. I'm trying to fix things, but I don't know how." Lila sighed, her anger giving way to exhaustion. "Fixing things isn't about showing up to one event and saying the right words. It's about showing up consistently, being present, and putting in the effort every day." Alex nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You're right. I don't know where to start." For a moment, Lila looked at him like she wanted to say more, but instead, she shook her head. "Start with Amelia. She's the one who needs you the most." The conversation ended there, leaving Alex feeling raw and exposed. He stayed at the event for another hour, observing quietly and helping where he could. As he left, he couldn't shake the image of Lila in her element, thriving in a way he had never fully appreciated. Back at his office the next day, Alex found the folder Sophia had left. He opened it for the first time, flipping through its contents. Employee testimonials filled the pages, recounting long hours, impossible expectations, and a lack of recognition. Each story was a knife to his carefully crafted image of himself as a visionary leader. Rachel knocked on his door, breaking his focus. "Sophia Grant called," she said. "She wants to set up another meeting." Alex frowned. "Did she say what it's about?" "She said she's been talking to more employees," Rachel replied, her tone cautious. "But she also said she wants to discuss what you're planning to do about it." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Tell her I'll meet her tomorrow." The following day, Sophia arrived at his office with her usual confidence, but this time there was a trace of curiosity in her expression. She sat across from him, placing her recorder on the desk. "Mr. Sterling," she began, "after speaking with your employees and reviewing the company's history, it's clear you've built something remarkable. But it's also clear that the cost has been steep, for your employees, for your family, and I imagine for yourself." Alex leaned back in his chair, her words cutting through his defenses. "Is this where you tell me I'm the villain?" he asked, his tone more resigned than defensive. Sophia tilted her head. "I don't think you're the villain, Alex. But I do think you're at a crossroads. You can keep going the way you have, or you can start making changes that reflect the person you want to be." Her words echoed what Lila had said, what Amelia's accusations had implied. Alex stared at the recorder, weighing his response. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally. Sophia's eyes softened. "Be honest. Not just with me, but with yourself. Figure out what matters most and start there." As she left, Alex sat alone in his office, staring out at the city skyline. The foundations of his empire felt steady beneath him, but the cracks in his personal life were impossible to ignore. He thought of Lila, of Amelia, and of the man he had been when he first started this journey. For the first time in years, he wondered if he could find his way back to him. Alex spent the days after his meeting with Sophia oscillating between reflection and action. He had started reaching out to his employees, taking small but genuine steps to address the issues Sophia had exposed. But his mind kept drifting to Amelia. Fixing his company was one thing, but repairing the rift with his daughter felt far more daunting. That Friday, Alex arrived at Lila's house for their scheduled meeting about Amelia's upcoming summer plans. He had been dreading it all day. Their recent conversations were civil at best, tense and accusatory at worst. But tonight, He was determined to stay calm and focus on what was best for Amelia. When Lila opened the door, her face was unreadable. "She's in her room," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "But we need to talk first." Alex followed her into the living room, where a stack of brochures sat on the coffee table. Lila gestured to them. "I've been looking into summer camps for her. Something creative, maybe something that focuses on the arts. She needs an outlet." Alex picked up one of the brochures, scanning it quickly. "These are all out of state," he said, frowning. "I thought we agreed she'd stay close to home." "We agreed she'd do what's best for her," Lila countered. "And right now, she needs more than just weekends with you and school during the week. She doesn't need to be shipped off to some camp," Alex said, his frustration rising. "She needs stability, not more time away from us." Lila's eyes narrowed. "Don't lecture me about stability, Alex. You're the one who barely shows up." "That's not fair," he shot back. "I've been trying? Lila interrupted, her voice sharp. "Showing up to one school event or making a few empty promises isn't trying. She sees through it, Alex. She sees how distracted you are, how work still comes first." Alex's temper flared. "And what about you? You've been so busy with your community center that you've barely had time for her either. Don't act like you're the perfect parent here." Their voices had risen without either of them realizing. The sound of a door creaking open made them both turn. Amelia stood at the edge of the hallway, her face pale and her eyes wide. "Stop it!" she shouted, her voice trembling. "You're always fighting. I hate it." "Amelia," Lila began, but Amelia spun on her heel and bolted out the front door before either of them could stop her. For a moment, Alex and Lila stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Then Alex sprang into action, grabbing his keys from the coffee table. "I'll check the park," he said, already heading for the door. "I'll drive around the neighborhood," Lila said, her voice tight with worry. They split up, each desperately searching for any sign of their daughter. Alex drove to the park near Lila's house, the same one where they used to bring Amelia when she was little. The swings creaked in the breeze, and the playground was eerily empty. He parked and got out, his chest tightening with every passing minute. He called her name, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Amelia! It's Dad! Please come out!" No answer. After circling the park twice, Alex pulled out his phone and called Lila. "She's not here," he said, his voice strained. "She's not on the main roads either," Lila replied, her own fear evident. "Let's meet back at the house and figure out where else she could have gone." When they regrouped, Alex leaned against the hood of his car, running a hand through his hair. "She can't have gone far. Maybe she went somewhere we used to take her." Lila nodded, her brow furrowed. "The lake?" she said suddenly. "She always loved going there." Alex's stomach twisted. The lake was a 10-minute drive away, a place they had often visited as a family before the divorce. Without another word, they got into their cars and headed there. When Alex arrived, he spotted Amelia sitting on the edge of the dock, her legs dangling over the water. Relief flooded him, but it was tempered by the sight of her small, hunched figure. She looked so fragile, so alone. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Amelia," he said gently. She turned her head slightly but didn't look at him. "Go away." Lila arrived moments later, rushing toward her daughter but stopping when she saw Alex gesture for her to wait. He sat down beside Amelia, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For the fighting, for everything. I know it's been hard on you, and I haven't made it any easier." Amelia didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the rippling water. "We were wrong to fight in front of you," Alex continued. "You didn't deserve that. None of this is your fault." Finally, Amelia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want things to go back to the way they were." Alex's throat tightened. "I know, sweetheart. I wish they could too. But even if they can't, I promise you this, we're going to do better. I'm going to do better." Lila stepped forward then, sitting on Amelia's other side. "We're both going to do better," she said softly. "You mean the world to us, Amelia. We're sorry we haven't shown that enough." Amelia wiped her eyes, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Alex hesitated for a moment, then reached out and pulled her into a hug. To his relief, she didn't pull away. They sat there for a while, the three of them watching the water as the sun dipped below the horizon. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. On the drive back, Alex and Lila spoke quietly, their voices no longer filled with anger but with a shared determination to do right by their daughter. They reminisced about the times they had brought Amelia to the lake, laughing at old memories and letting the tension between them dissolve, if only temporarily. By the time they reached Lila's house, Amelia was fast asleep in the back seat. Alex carried her inside and tucked her into bed, his heart heavy but hopeful. As he stepped out of her room, Lila met him in the hallway. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. Alex nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "We'll figure this out. For her." For the first time in a long time, Lila gave him a small, genuine smile. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step closer to something better. The memory of that evening at the lake stayed with Alex for days. Seeing Amelia so fragile and lost had shaken him deeply, but the moment she'd allowed herself to cry in his arms gave him a glimmer of hope. He replayed their conversation in his mind, her small voice admitting how much she wanted things to go back to the way they were. The weight of her words lingered, and for the first time in years, Alex felt truly exposed, not as a CEO or a figure of power, but as a father who had failed. He called Lila a few days later, unsure if she would even pick up. To his surprise, she answered on the first ring. "How's Amelia doing?" he asked tentatively. "She's better," Lila said. "Quieter than usual, but I think she's processing everything. She's been asking about you." Alex's throat tightened. "I'd like to see her this weekend. Maybe take her to the park. The one we used to go to." Lila hesitated, but her voice softened when she replied. "She'd like that." When Saturday came, Alex arrived early, armed with a picnic basket and Amelia's favorite snacks. Lila had agreed to join them, and though the idea of spending the afternoon together felt strange, Alex knew it was the right thing to do. Amelia's eyes lit up when she saw him, and she ran to hug him before stopping abruptly, as if she wasn't sure whether she should. Alex knelt down, opening his arms, and she hesitated for only a moment before rushing into his embrace. "I miss you, kiddo," he said softly, kissing the top of her head. "I miss you too," she murmured. Lila arrived shortly after, watching the scene from a distance before walking over. The three of them set up a blanket in the shade of a tall oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. It felt almost like old times, though the unspoken tension lingered. As they ate, Amelia's mood lightened, and soon she was giggling at Alex's attempts to juggle pieces of fruit. Lila couldn't help but laugh, though she quickly stifled it, her gaze flickering to Alex with a mix of surprise and nostalgia. After the meal, Amelia ran off to the swings, leaving Alex and Lila alone on the blanket. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. "She's happier today," Alex said, watching Amelia. "It's been a while since I've seen her laugh like that." Lila nodded. "She's resilient, but she's been carrying a lot. We both know that's on us." Alex turned to her, his face etched with regret. "I know I've been the cause of most of it. I let work take over my life, and in the process, I hurt both of you." Lila looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "It wasn't just you," she said quietly. "I let it happen too. I stopped fighting for us when I should have. I gave up." Alex shook his head. "You had every reason to. I didn't listen. You told me what you needed, what Amelia needed, and I ignored it. I thought I was doing the right thing by working harder, by building this empire for us, but all I did was push you away." The raw honesty in his voice caught Lila off guard. She turned to watch Amelia on the swings, her small figure silhouetted against the bright sky. "We both made mistakes," she said softly. But what's important now is that we don't keep making them. Alex nodded, his voice breaking as he spoke. I can't go back and fix everything, but I want to be better. For her. For you. Lila's gaze softened, and for the first time in years she saw the man she had fallen in love with, not the polished CEO, but the young dreamer who had once promised her the world. She reached out, placing a hand on his. I see that, Alex. And I think Amelia sees it too. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared past settling between them. Then Lila spoke again, her voice steady. We'll never be what we were, but that doesn't mean we can't move forward. We can still be a team for Amelia. Alex met her gaze, gratitude and determination in his eyes. I'd like that. The sound of Amelia's laughter drew their attention. She had moved to the monkey bars, her face glowing with joy as she swung across. Alex felt a pang of bittersweet pride, knowing that these small moments of happiness were what truly mattered. As the afternoon stretched on, they walked together through the park, reminiscing about the times they had spent there as a family. Amelia dragged them to her favorite spots, pointing out the bench where they used to sit and the tree where she had once insisted on building a secret clubhouse. The memories were a mix of joy and sorrow, a reminder of what they had lost but also what they still had. When it was time to leave, Amelia held both their hands as they walked back to the car. For a moment, Alex allowed himself to believe that things could be different, that they could find a way to create a new kind of family, one built on understanding and mutual respect. Later that evening, after dropping Amelia off at Lila's house, Alex lingered at the door. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving me the chance to make things right. Lila nodded, her expression softer than he had seen in years. It's not about second chances, Alex. It's about showing up. And so far you're doing that. As he drove home, Alex felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was heading in the right direction. And that, he realized, was enough. The afternoon at the park had been a turning point. For the first time in years, Alex felt a genuine connection with both Lila and Amelia. That evening, as he stared out at the city lights from his penthouse, he thought about Lila's words. It's not about second chances. It's about showing up. He realized that if he truly wanted to rebuild his relationships, with Amelia, with Lila, even with himself, it would take more than sporadic efforts. It would require consistency and action, not just in his personal life but in the way he approached everything, including his company. The next morning, Alex arrived at his office earlier than usual. He sent a message to his leadership team, calling for an all-hands meeting that afternoon. He wasn't entirely sure what he was going to say, but he knew it was time to take a hard look at the culture he had created at Sterling Industries. As he worked on his presentation, Rachel interrupted him. Sophia Grant called again, she said cautiously. She wants to schedule another meeting. Alex sighed, feeling a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Set it up, he said. Let's get it over with. When Sophia arrived later that week, her demeanor was notably different. She still exuded confidence, but there was a hint of something else, curiosity, maybe even respect. I've been hearing things, she began as she sat across from Alex. From your employees. From people who know you personally. And? Alex asked, his tone guarded. And, Sophia said, leaning forward. It seems like you're trying to turn things around. I'll admit, I didn't expect that. Alex raised an eyebrow. You sound almost impressed. Let's not get carried away, Sophia replied, though her smile took the edge off her words. I'm still a journalist, Alex. But I also believe in telling the whole story. And right now, it seems like the story is changing. She pulled out her recorder and notebook. I want to know what's driving this shift. Why now? Alex hesitated, but then he thought of Amelia, of Lila, and of the person he wanted to become. Because I finally realized that success means nothing if it comes at the expense of the people who matter most, he said honestly. I've spent years chasing numbers, building this empire, but I lost sight of why I started in the first place. I'm trying to fix that. Sophia studied him for a moment before nodding. Fair enough. But actions speak louder than words. So, what are you actually doing to make things right? The question lingered in Alex's mind long after Sophia left. It wasn't enough to say he was changing, he had to show it. That afternoon, during the company-wide meeting, Alex stood before his team, his usual air of authority tempered by vulnerability. I've been thinking a lot about what this company stands for, he began, his voice steady but reflective. Sterling Industries was built on the idea of innovation and ambition, but somewhere along the way, we lost sight of the bigger picture. We've prioritized growth over people, profit over purpose. And that has to change. He took a deep breath before continuing. Starting today, we're committing to a new direction. We'll be launching a series of initiatives focused on sustainability, community impact, and employee well-being. This isn't just about improving our image, it's about creating a culture we can all be proud of. The room was silent for a moment before the applause started. It wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine, and Alex felt the weight of his words settle into something real. Over the following weeks, Alex threw himself into the new initiatives. He worked with his leadership team to implement policies that prioritized work-life balance, invested in projects that supported underserved communities, and collaborated with environmental organizations to reduce the company's carbon footprint. Inspired by Lila's community center, Alex also pledged funding for similar projects in other parts of the city. He didn't tell her about it right away, but when she eventually found out, she surprised him with a phone call. I heard what you've been doing, she said, her tone neutral but not cold. It's unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Alex asked cautiously. Lila chuckled softly. Good, I think. It's nice to see you following through. Her words were like a bomb, and Alex felt a flicker of pride, not in the accomplishments themselves, but in the fact that Lila was starting to believe in him again. At home, his efforts with Amelia were also paying off. He made a point to show up for every school event, every soccer game, and every parent-teacher conference. He stopped taking work calls during their weekends together, focusing entirely on her. At first, Amelia seemed hesitant, as if waiting for him to revert to his old habits. But over time, her guard began to lower. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Amelia leaned against him and said, "You're different now." "How so?" Alex asked, though his heart swelled at her words. "You're here," she said simply. "You don't feel like a stranger anymore." It was a small comment, but it meant the world to him. Sophia's article came out a month later. Titled, A CEO's Redemption, The Evolution of Alex Sterling. It was a nuanced portrait that highlighted both his past mistakes and his efforts to make amends. It didn't paint him as a hero, Sophia was too honest for that, but it showed a man trying to rebuild, to learn, to grow. The article went viral, sparking discussions about corporate responsibility and the human cost of ambition. But for Alex, the most meaningful response came from Lila. "I read the article," she said when they met to drop Amelia off one evening. "It's honest. And it shows how far you've come." Alex nodded, his heart full. "I still have a long way to go." "We all do," Lila said. "But you're on the right track." As Alex drove home that night, he reflected on how far they had come as a family. They weren't perfect, and they never would be, but they were trying. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The opening day of the community center arrived on a crisp, sunny morning, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Bright banners hung across the entrance, and clusters of families gathered, chatting excitedly. Children ran around, their laughter echoing through the open courtyard, while volunteers guided guests through the newly completed spaces. Alex parked a few blocks away, feeling the familiar pang of nerves that had accompanied him to moments like these in recent months. It wasn't just the crowd, he knew this day was significant, not just for Lila and Amelia, but for himself. The community center was more than a building. It was a symbol of everything Lila had stood for and a reminder of the support he had failed to give her when she needed it most. As he approached the entrance, A volunteer greeted him with a warm smile and directed him toward the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He hesitated when he spotted Lila standing near the stage, clipboard in hand, giving final instructions to a group of speakers. She was in her element, radiant and confident, her hard work culminating in this moment. Amelia was at her side, holding a pair of oversized scissors and fidgeting with excitement. She spotted Alex before Lila did and waved enthusiastically. He waved back, his heart lifting at her joy. When the ceremony began, Alex found a spot near the back of the crowd. Lila took the stage, her voice steady and full of emotion as she addressed the audience. She spoke about the center's mission to serve the community, provide a safe haven for families, and create opportunities for children to thrive. Her words were met with applause, and Alex couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Amelia joined her for the ribbon cutting, and the crowd cheered as they snipped the bright red ribbon. The doors swung open, and people began pouring inside to explore the center. Alex hung back, content to observe. He watched as Lila guided groups through the building, her passion evident in every gesture and explanation. Amelia darted between rooms, eager to show off the spaces she had seen throughout the construction process. At one point, Alex caught sight of the two of them laughing together in the art room, Amelia holding up a lopsided clay sculpture while Lila grinned. The sight filled him with a bittersweet ache. It was a beautiful moment, a testament to the bond they had, and yet it underscored everything he had lost. Still, he couldn't help but feel grateful. Lila and Amelia were happy, and that was what mattered most. As the event wound down, Alex stepped inside the building for the first time. The design was stunning, open, warm, and inviting. He wandered through the halls, pausing to admire the thoughtful touches, vibrant murals painted by local artists, cozy reading nooks, and a bustling activity room filled with children laughing and playing. Near the front, he ran into Lila, who was directing volunteers as they cleaned up. She looked up, surprised to see him, but her expression softened. "Hey," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't think you'd come inside. I couldn't miss seeing what you've built," Alex replied, his voice sincere. "It's incredible, Lila. Truly." She smiled, and for a moment they stood in comfortable silence, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything you've done to support this. I know you didn't have to." Alex shook his head. "It wasn't just for the center. It was for you, and for Amelia. You both deserve better from me. I'm just glad I could help, even in a small way." Her gaze lingered on him, and for the first time in years, there was no tension, no blame, just understanding. "You've come a long way, Alex. I think she sees it. I see it too." He nodded, his throat tightening. "It means a lot to hear that." They didn't say goodbye, but when Amelia ran up and threw her arms around him, it felt like the closing of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. A week later, Sophia's article was published, a follow-up to her earlier exposé. From ambition to accountability, Alex Sterling's journey delved into his transformation as a leader and as a person. It wasn't glowing, Sophia was too honest to gloss over his past mistakes, but it was fair and balanced, highlighting the changes he had made and the impact they were starting to have. The piece went viral, sparking debates about corporate responsibility and redemption. Alex received messages from colleagues, acquaintances, and even strangers who resonated with his story. But what mattered most were the reactions from Lila and Amelia. "You're famous again," Amelia teased one evening, holding up her tablet with Sophia's article on the screen. "But in a good way this time." Alex laughed, ruffling her hair. "I'll take it." As the weeks turned into months, their new dynamic began to solidify. Alex and Lila found a rhythm in co-parenting, balancing responsibilities and supporting each other in ways they hadn't before. Amelia blossomed under their renewed attention, her confidence growing with each passing day. One evening, Alex sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling outside his window. The photo album Evelyn had sent him months ago sat on the desk, its leather cover worn but familiar. He opened it one last time, flipping through the pages slowly, letting the memories wash over him. The images no longer felt like a painful reminder of what he had lost. Instead, they felt like a foundation, a starting point for the person he had become. He lingered on the photo of their family at the beach, Amelia's tiny hand clutching his and Lila's, their smiles bright and unguarded. With a deep breath, Alex closed the album and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't about forgetting or erasing the past, it was about moving forward while honoring it. As he leaned back in his chair, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He wasn't the man he used to be, and he wasn't yet the man he wanted to become. But he was trying, and for the first time, that felt like enough. As the journey of Alex Sterling reminds us, redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about learning from it, growing, and striving to be better for the people who matter most. His story shows that even in the face of regret and broken relationships, it's never too late to change course and rebuild. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt tales of transformation and redemption. And if this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments, what would your next step be if you were in Alex's shoes? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.